delighted to be joined by my colleague, Yunus Arikan, who is the Director of Global Advocacy at ICLE, where ICLE is our counterpart, the focal point for the local government and municipal authorities group, right below us in this building, in this charming building. And you've been very, very busy, hosting many, many delegations from cities, regions around the world, but in particular following what's happening on this issue of the treatment of local government and subnational action at COP28. So, Yunus, before I invite you to start and share, provide us an overview of what's been happening in the last 12 days. Just want to introduce our other two speakers. So we're going to move next to Leonie Cooper, who's joining us from London. And Leonie is a member of the London Assembly, where she's the chair of the Environment Committee. And has been for many, many years very active on this agenda around climate change, particularly the role of cities in accelerating delivery. And then we're going to hear from my colleague Nameka Oru, who is from Globe Nigeria, but very importantly, had worked on the bill, the Nigeria's climate change bill, and facilitated seeing it through to it becoming an act, and more recently has been involved through activities related to Globe with the transposition of the federal level law to the subnational, the regional level law. So his experiences will be very valuable to hear from. But without further ado, if I can hand over the microphone to you, Yunus, and let us know what the state of play is now.
Malini, first things first, a big congratulations and applause for you, for your leadership, for creating this space for your constituency and your perseverance to make your voice heard, to make your constituency visible. I think that is really a great achievement. I remember in Glasgow, in the opening of our pavilion, you were our guest from remotely joining us, and now physically this space is here, and I also have followed every day. You have been doing fantastic engagements, and I think that's another leadership that I think we should all be proud and happy. This round only for the negotiations, no? The local ones will come later on. I think what's going on, of course, here is typical the V hours. It was, of course, a remarkable leadership throughout the year from the presidency. I think everybody was sincere that none of us were expecting this, that they have demonstrated an unbelievable inclusive approach, and they have really given opportunities for us to provide feedbacks to their planning, and from LGMA, the local governments, whatever we have sent to them, we received a positive feedback. So I think if we are now here still hopeful about phase out, about adaptation, we really are able to do this with this kind of a presidency, which was something to be noted on. And of course, throughout the evolution of these 2 weeks, they also managed the flow of the engagement, the leaders, the declarations. But that's exactly the interesting thing. In the past, we have seen this also, especially in Glasgow, Sharm el-Sheikh. What is announced in the first couple of days, in fact, can only make sense if their spirit is reflected into the text. So we have seen so many declarations, so many commitments. This was also the case in the past. None of them were in the Glasgow Pact as such. It was just recognized as, okay, take note of, but the real content was not very possible to reflect. So we still, as of today, don't have the key documents available. And yesterday was a bit interesting day, because when the adaptation text was released, it was the understanding that it was designed as the presidency text, and there were no brackets. You know this language, what it means. If it is a presidency text, there's no brackets. This means that they have their name behind that. We were just discussing, wow, this gives the impression that they would first sort out adaptation, then they would finish the big piece, which is the phase-out discussion. And I think it would make sense because they are trying to finish still on the 12th, which is tomorrow. We are hoping, our understanding was that this will be sorted out yesterday, so that the whole day today we could focus on the GST outcome. But Surprisingly, it didn't turn out like that. So I really don't know how things will evolve in the next couple of hours. Having consensus in both at the same time is not easy. So what we feel so far from our perspective, multi-level, if we talk about the decisions, we will talk about the local level engagement later on, but we have started with the Glasgow Climate Pact. So we had the Paris Agreement, 2015, recognition of all levels of government. And it's not mayors, all levels of government. That includes parliaments, that includes staff, that includes their political leaders. That's why we are so excited of that. And we again made one more step in Glasgow. It says the urgent need for multi-level action. Obviously, if you read the text, this is something more than recognition. Multi-level action is the thing really asks us to do it together. And that's why we were excited on the way to Sharm el-Sheikh, because now it's time for us to deliver what it means. Nobody knows what multi-level is. And it's very likely that every country, every city maybe have their own multi-level styles. I mean, you know, in the UK, there are different administration structures, so their multi-level could be different from London to Birmingham to Glasgow, and definitely different in China, in Europe, in Kiribati. So, but the notion that everybody has to have their own style of multi-level, which means they should now bring the new climate plans, which is the real Paris compatible plans, to be prepared, consulted, designed, and implemented and financed together. That is what we have brought to the table here, building on our achievements from Sharm el-Sheikh. We were excited, and because we had the advantage of having a collaboration of the presidency with Bloomberg, which was the first time there was a local climate action summit during the World Climate Summit. We had a CHAMP initiative, which is nations committing to work with us. That's different than the previous commitments. In the past, we were always asked cities and regions sign up their own commitment. This is a commitment by nations. It's signed up by now, endorsed by 60 plus nations. So our hope was that when the text was released 2 days ago, there will be examples of this into the paragraphs, because if you have noticed, there is a structure called guidance on the way forward. Our hope is that the guidance should be, the new plans should be in collaboration with multi-level action, or through multi-level collaboration, where appropriate or as appropriate. This is not there. So in that sense, we are a bit disappointed. And here is the real message we have communicated since yesterday. We believe, we know the negotiation is that presidency should not be imposing anything that is not been on the table. Therefore, our message since yesterday is that to the parties, this presidency has delivered what they could deliver on their own limits. It's now to the parties, those who endorsed CHAMP, those who are believing in this idea. Morocco, US, Russia, China, they have put this text on the table in the GST submissions. If you have said that you'd like to incorporate multi-level and urbanization, please put this on the text. If you put this text on the table, it doesn't mean that it will be adopted, but at least presidency can build on it. So our message in the last 48 hours is all the parties, especially those friendly to us, as I said, North and South, we have mapped that we have a huge collaboration that could be an exemplary. They had already put their text on the GST output documents, but it's not on the official table. In the next couple of hours, we are still hopeful. The new text will have, because we have heard from parties, yes, they are working on it, but it is really one of those topics that very, very difficult for parties, because it's different than an energy collaboration or hydrogen, because literally this is the discussion, and that's my concluding remark so that we can hear you. This commitment, this CHAMP initiative, and this idea is literally a new mindset of governance. We are coming from this 1992s, our major groups. We're not anymore major groups. We are literally share of power, responsibility, resources as appropriate. And it's not easy. Mayors, governors are not ready. They don't know how this is done. Ministers, prime ministers, definitely not ready. But everybody is aware that we have to try this. We have to test this, because The other option is not taking us to anywhere, which is one ministry, one government, just deciding and then asking the rest to follow or not to follow, is not response to climate emergency. We cannot do this. This is exactly what we are seeing, that every ministry is now here, every society member is here. This is a collective challenge. Obviously, the governance-wise, the national governments have the responsibility, but they should also open the space so that we can work with them, collaborate with them. We don't have to agree on everything, but there should be a lot of things that we can do together. So.
Fantastic. So thank you for providing that. I think it's a mixed overview. We may see that text in which it's important to see the recognition of multi-level action. But I think regardless of that, I was in a meeting with the COP president a few nights ago, in which he talked about the old style of running COPs needing to be, to be knocked on the head, that was no longer viable. And he spoke about the paradigm shift. And to give the presidency the credit that you're also recognizing, they have attempted to have that paradigm shift. But if I can come to you, Leonie, because of course, you're in London, and to be honest, whether the language is in the text over here or not, it doesn't change the reality of the obligations that the City of London has, that the London Assembly has, to ensure that there is a strategy on climate change which is being delivered. So for those of who are joining either live by the live stream here in person, if you can just explain that complex structure of London governments and the challenge of climate change from your perspective. Over to you.
Hi, thank you. It says the host has stopped my video, but if you want to start my video, very happy to do that. Otherwise, I'll just speak from online. So I think it's really important that cities like London and around the world, as well as in the UK, assess what they need to do, and then, frankly, just get on with it. And I think it's really important for regional authorities and cities to do that. For example, in the United Kingdom, since I was elected to the London Assembly in 2016, which is 7.5 years ago, we've had 5 British prime ministers. So, for example, in that kind of situation where you have instability or a lot of change at governmental level, at national government level, it's really important to just get on with things. So I'm going to start by giving a tiny explanation about how London government works, and it's a great honour and a privilege to be beamed in today and to be part of today's session. Thank you very much, Melanie, for inviting me to this event. So in London, in 1986, the previous version of Pan-London government was abolished. And then we had 14 years without having any kind of citywide government. Now, from the year 2000 onwards, we've had the Greater London Authority, which was the new version of the Pan-London government. So, if you like, it's quite a fresh, young organisation. And the current mayor is only the 3rd mayor since then. There were lots of different forms before that, but we've only had London government in its current form for 23 years. Elections are every 4 years, so we've got another one coming up in May 2024. And at the same time, when the directly elected mayor is elected, 25 assembly members, of which I am one, are elected simultaneously. 14 represent geographical parts of the city, and the other 11 are elected using proportional representation. And we're all elected, and then after that, there's no difference really between our roles. And when I was first elected in 2016, between 2016 and 18, I immediately became the chair of the Environment Committee, and I've been the deputy chair from 2018 pretty much through until 2023, May this year, when I became the chair again. So I'm currently leading on the Environment Committee. And the main environmental plans of the mayor are set out in the London Environment Strategy, which was adopted in 2018, and the London Plan, which has a much stronger force in law, but it also has a very long process to go through. And that was finally adopted as the London Plan in 2021. So it took 5 years for that to come in. But alongside those documents, we also have the transport strategy and the housing strategy and a number of financial initiatives which are instrumental in working towards the mayor's target of making London a net zero city by 2030. And that's a very stretching target, and we may, of course, not hit it. But it's better to say 2030 and really aim for that, and also not to wait for the government to make up its mind on what it's going to do and just to push ahead. So looking at the environment strategy, we've got various key targets enshrined within that. For example, one target is to double London's solar energy generation capacity by 2030. Another is to recycle 65% of London's waste by 2030. Currently, more than 50% of London's waste is burnt. And obviously, I think the thing that the mayor is probably best known for is the action that he's taken in terms of cleaning up London's air, which was toxic, both in terms of exhaust gas emissions, but also particulate matter, the particles coming out of exhaust. And of course, that has a twin impact. It both cleans up the air if you take action against, having all that stuff coming out of privately owned fossil powered vehicles, but it also addresses the climate emergency by reducing fossil fuel powered vehicles from being on London's roads. And so the ultra low emission zone started in the centre of London, then expanded to inner London, and then just at the end of August this year is now covering the whole of London. And I'm not going to say that that has been without controversy, because it has been quite controversial. And we've actually found that some Londoners have been very aggressively against it and have burnt out the cameras, and have set light to the cameras and things like this. So that's, has engendered quite a strong response from some people who are very committed to having their own vehicle, and they don't care what comes out of the exhaust pipe, even notwithstanding the climate impacts and also the health impacts, because they are massive. And other cities have taken other routes towards this, banning diesel or having some cars can only be used on one day and not others. What else has London been doing? So the London Assembly, when I was the chair between 2016 and 18, I was very keen to do something to reduce plastic use in the city, particularly thousands and thousands of millions of water bottles that quite often then get into the environment and start to break down and get into the river and end up in the sea. So we produced a report, and then the mayor took it on board very strongly, and has now implemented 110 water fountains across the city, and they've got clickers on them that measure how usage. So what's been the impact? He's worked with Thames Water. He also worked with London Zoo, the Zoological Society of London, who have scientists who've seen the impact in the oceans of plastic. And so the data just from one fountain, from all of the fountains excluding the period of COVID, when obviously a lot of them weren't being used, but from March, they have dispensed a total of 783,000 litres of water, which is the equivalent of over 1.5 million half-litre single-use plastic bottles not being used on the streets of London, which is fantastic. So that's been a great removal of those bottles from London, and also shops have got involved in what's called the Refill London scheme. 5,000 locations across the capital now. People can just walk in with their reusable bottles and just ask for them to be refilled in shops. So as well as the fountains, we've also got 5,000 places where you can just walk in and say, hey, I want to fill up my bottle. Fantastic. Water, we're still using too much water in London, so we still have some issues about reducing our water use, and that's been a real problem in London. That is an absolute crisis that is coming down the pipe towards us all. And because, today is a very grey day, it's about 11 degrees in London, it quite often rains, people think that London is overflowing with lots and lots of water. It isn't. It's actually about as dry as Dubai. And so we need both more sustainable drainage, because we are starting to get the heavier rainfall in very short bursts, but we also need to stop using as much drinking water. We're very profligate with our water. On biodiversity, the mayor has been doing a huge amount. He declared London to be the first national park city, so joining national parks across the rest of the UK for trying to bring a focus on nature. And he's set up a number of different funds, including tree planting, green infrastructure projects, and also trying to see the return of wildlife to London, which we have seen now, partly also because we've been cleaning up the River Thames. And there are some tributaries where we've actually got fish and mammals have come back that weren't there before. And the mayor has even introduced beavers into one part of London. And of course, they had to be named. So they were called Justin Beaver and Sigourney Beaver. So everybody knows who they are. Alongside that, and I think it's quite important to involve the public by initiatives like that, by giving them names. I know it's anthropomorphizing, but it does help with that engagement. Alongside of that, to try and build towards the solar generation totals, we've had a project called Solar Together, which has gone through a number of different rounds. Also, not without some difficulty in the last round, but it has encouraged over 3,000 Londoners to put in solar panels that weren't being encouraged because there'd been some previous government initiatives that got stopped in about 2012. And this has been one way of encouraging people back into putting solar on their homes. We've still got so much more to do. And also some people installing batteries. The mayor worked with Octopus Energy to set up London Power. And it was a good, sensible thing to do, to go into partnership, because running an energy company is not the day job or the first task of the Greater London Authority. And so that is still going strong. There have been some problems with independently set up companies that some other cities outside of London set up. And we've also been encouraging Londoners who work very locally in small community groups, who have set up community energy groups. We've got one in my own part of southwest London called Crew Energy. We've done 6 rounds of support for those groups, and we've seen £400,000 of money going into them, and 150 projects. And of course, the community groups themselves then raise money of their own. And so it's been fantastic to see across 27 of London's boroughs, and there's now 2.3 megawatts being generated just through solar alone. And the community energy groups have done other forms of renewable energy as well. And again, this was against the background of the urban community energy funds being cut by the national government. So London community energy funding was at one point the only funding for community energy in the whole of England. Actually, the government has just this summer has just gone back to saying, actually, we'll put some money into community energy, which is a good thing, but they need to put in more. And through the London Plan, that's where the force of law is. So that includes, and I spent a lot of time working on this with other assembly members and attending the examination in public, which takes 5 months and then feeds into the final version of the plan. And it covers the sustainable urban drainage. So that's in the plan. So anyone who wants to do any new developments must include that. The same with renewables on buildings. That's in the London Plan. Heat networks is in the London Plan. We are so behind many parts of Europe where there are many heat networks. We really have not focused on that enough in London. Active travel also gets into the London Plan, because the way that the planning system works, it seems that come to the Greater London Authority for consideration, the planners can say there's not enough cycle parking, for example. There's not enough footpaths. So all of that can be in as well. as well as the healthy streets approach of changing the way our streets are laid out. And of course, the London Plan can enforce installing electric vehicle charging points, which are essential as we move away from the fossil fuel powered vehicles in London. For those journeys that do still need to be taken by some sort of vehicle. It also enforces policies around waste, and it encourages anaerobic digestion, although we are going to have a bit of a crisis here because the government is encouraging now food waste to be separated, and we probably don't actually have enough anaerobic digesters to deal with it all once it's separated. And of course, the green infrastructure, which is throughout the London Plan as well. So sitting alongside of that, as I mentioned, the transport strategy and the housing strategy, where the mayor, we don't control, the Greater London Authority doesn't control most of the roads in the capital. They are controlled by the individual London boroughs. But the mayor works in conjunction with those boroughs. So the transport strategy sits across all of the roads to try and bring them together for the almost 9 million people that live in London. And so decarbonising transport, getting biodiversity along those roads are both absolutely essential. Same with housing, that the mayor has powers over it and also channels funding to the London boroughs, but it's actually the boroughs themselves who have to look after and promote retrofit, the installation into houses that in many cases the UK has the leakiest properties in the whole of Europe, pretty much. So they need a lot of insulation as well as then the installation of renewables. Finally, just to touch on climate budgeting. So we've introduced carbon budgeting now at the Greater London Authority. And that has seen various different parts of the Greater London Authority, Transport for London, the police and the fire brigade reducing their own emissions by substantial percentages, obviously need to go further. And we've also been promoting green bonds and bringing in money through a green finance initiative to fund not just schemes being run by the GLA, the Greater London Authority, but also by boroughs and other parts of the public sector, because we know that the public sector needs to work with the private sector, and all the money cannot possibly come from government alone. The figure for decarbonising all of the houses in London where people live, and that's just domestic dwellings, is estimated to be 55 billion. And you know, the Greater London Authority, councils and government do not have that, so we have to work together with the public and the private sector. I'm going to leave it there. I hope that's been useful, Malini, and everybody else. Thank you.
No, fantastic. So thank you so much, Leonie. Firstly, I'm so sorry we can't actually see you on the screen. I don't know what the problem is, but perhaps we'll get it resolved. But the key thing is you provide such a comprehensive overview of London's the structure of governance, the range of policies, the range of initiatives. And one standout for me was when you mentioned the work of the London Assembly on the issue around water fountains, how an initiative that emerged from the Assembly was then picked up by the executive, by the Mayor of London, and then transposed and expanded across London. That's the kind of thing those kind of examples are hugely motivating. And you were also really, really expressive. I mean, we were almost with you in London on a grey Monday, but it's still sunny and it's lunchtime here in Dubai. So thank you so much for that really valuable contribution. I'm now going to switch gears and move to my colleague Nameka from Nigeria to give us an example of how a national federal policy, federal framework law on climate change is being transposed at the state level. You've got some brilliant experience here, Nameka, so over to you.
Thank you very much, Marlene. Let me first say that post Glasgow, it was Eunice who we had a meeting, a Zoom call, February 2022, when you talked about the issue of multi-level action, and so I just ran with that. Some friends actually called me the multi-level man after that, so in a way of teasing me. So if like what Marlene said, about whatever, no matter what the language of a text is, there are things that have to be in a certain way. For instance, Nigeria is a federal, we operate a federal system of government. So because of that, we have items that are under the exclusive list and then items that are under the concurrent list. and then those are under the residual list. Those under the exclusive list are items that can only be legislated on by the National Assembly. Then those under the concurrent list are items that can be legislated on by both the state assemblies and the National Assembly, while the residual are strictly for the state assembly and of course the local government councillors, you know. So, and the issue of climate change is part of that, those on the concurrent list. So even though we worked so hard to get Nigeria Climate Change Act, it was critical that we had to step it down and go down to the state level and get state legislators to begin to domesticate, in quotes, these acts, so that they will now bring in their own experiences from the grassroots to create a different law, but which is still in conformity with what we have at the federal level. So to that extent, we have Rivers State that have already moved ahead to get a Climate Change Act. I know that Ebonyi State government is working towards getting one too. You know, another example of this is the Electricity Act that Nigeria signed into law in June of 2023. You know, which totally revolutionized the whole thing. But before then, the National Assembly, the National Assembly, had removed electricity from the exclusive list and placed it under the concurrent list in some form of constitutional amendment. You know, the Enugu State government has run with that immediately, and then they've been able to pass the State Assembly of Enugu State passed their own electricity bill, which was signed into law by the state governor. And that Electricity Act, Enugu State Electricity Act, gives them the power to now be able to generate and distribute electricity, even in places where there are federal grids. You know, before in Nigeria, we didn't have that. Of course, the liberalization of the electricity sector by the president when he signed into law the electricity bill of 2023 had made it open such that states can now generate electricity for themselves, distribute for themselves, you know. But the important thing about the Enugu State Electricity Act is that the key part of electricity generation is going to be focused on renewables, you know, which is also something that the federal government is trying to do, trying to say, okay, let's introduce renewables to the energy mix, because Nigeria has this ambition of making sure that 30% of our electricity mix comes from renewables by 2030, you know. So the point I'm trying to make is that the state legislators have critical roles to play, you know, when you talk about climate action or addressing the issues of climate emergency, because for a state or for a country that has operates a federal system of government, it's important that whatever laws that are made at the national level must again be domesticated at the state level for it to have any effect on the states and then the local government areas. So for us in Nigeria, it's like the National Assembly domesticates international treaties, but then the State Assembly would now have to do something again to bring it down to the state level, which is some form of like a vertical integration of laws and all of these things. So that's exactly how I understood the multi-level thing that you're talking about, and then this is what we've been trying to do in Nigeria. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Nameka. And there are really useful parallels that others, those in other countries, can pick up on with this language of devolution, where you have particular policy areas which are devolved to the state level. If I can just draw you out on the example that you gave of Rivers State in Nigeria, which domesticated the national law, because it was a very unusual candidate for doing that, because it is a petroleum producing state. So if you can speak to what were some of the drivers that led to the state leadership adopting the climate change law?
Yeah, thank you. I would say that, you know, like in a very funny way, and say that we were responsible for that. I like to say that anyway, but just as a joke, because shortly before Rivers State passed the climate change bill, Globe held what we call the Student MP Climate Surgery in Rivers State, and then we invited the chair of the Environment Committee of the Rivers State House of Assembly to be part of it. Sam here was the Globe staff on ground to coordinate it while I was in Abuja, also trying to run point. So during that particular event, he was able to commit to the fact that they would make sure that they pass the bill and then send it to the governor for assent. But it's important, I like to always say this, that for countries like ours, it's always important that when you are talking about a climate emergency, that you single out tangibles, because these tangibles are the things that could push the politicians to actually take action. For Rivers State, the key issue was the issue of suits. You know, so I think it was just from burning of fossil fuel or something, but we had this serious issue that lasted for over 5 years, where you wake up in the morning and then you have dark particles all over your white places, windows, beds, like after a while, if you try to clean your nose, you see that you have soot in your nose, so it was a really serious issue. People started talking about the health implications, what will happen to people who are living in River State after so many years, or so many years from now, because health-wise, that was really, really dangerous. So it became a critical issue that people were talking about. And that also speaks to the power of the people, being able to take action. So when people started talking about this seriously, it became something that actually motivated the legislators to push. Civil society actually played a key role in pushing for the domestication of the Nigerian Climate Change Act in River State. But because of this critical issue, it was foregrounded that this law is going to help in ensuring that we tackle the issue of the soot, which poses a great health risk to people living in River State. So the soot issue was a very, very key driver to ensuring that the River State legislature was able to pass the climate change bill, and then that the governor assented to it. Like you said, River State is the bulk of Rivers revenue comes through fossil fuel. So nobody actually expected that Rivers State was going to be the first Nigerian state to domesticate the Climate Change Act. People were looking towards Lagos State. Lagos State is like cosmopolitan. They're always ahead of every other state when it comes to even revenue generation, pushing for issues, and all of that. So everybody thought Lagos State has a very, very robust climate policy, but they don't have a climate change law. So it was Rivers State that did it. And then what pushed them was that tangible, the issue of suits and the health implications for it.
Fantastic. And I also just want to, commend the work that you've done. Of course, the initiative that you mentioned that was so eye-opening for policymakers, for legislators, was the Student MP Climate Surgeries. And that's a model that developed in London as part of London's Climate Action Week. So it's interesting that over the course of the last 5 years, we've seen that model where young people, through their schools, engage with their local constituency MPs to talk about the practical issues regarding climate change, the local impact, what they can do about it to become much more climate literate, but also engage as young citizens in that political process, part of citizenship development. So that's the model that we have now, been adapting in Senegal, in Nigeria, in other parts of the world, and it's delivering results. I mean, it's extraordinary. So at this point, we have about 10 minutes. I'd like to open it up for discussion. If you can just raise your hand and just identify yourself, the question or the comment that you have, that'd be great. Who would like to go first?
Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for this amazing session. I've learned quite a lot. I love the word climate literate. It's a very important message you are talking about there. What can we do to make Nigerians more climate literate, especially or Africans? Because we are talking about climate change. We've been talking about for quite a while now. We have curriculums now being built. But what are you doing at the government level, at the state level, to make that Nigerians more climate literate, not just to go on the street, be activists, but get them more engaged?
And I know, Leonie, you're still with us online, so if there are questions for Leonie.
I am online, but I couldn't hear that very well because there's a bit of other noise I'm not quite sure where it's coming from.
Okay, so we're just picking up some questions for you. I think you can open your camera now. Just try it. Okay, fantastic. Hello. There you go. There's a beacon of lights in the room. Thank you. Now we can start taking all those pictures. Just bin all the earlier ones. Okay, so questions for Leonie, and even indeed, Yunus, you may have one.
Maybe not a question, but to complement, because this is exactly what we have started this year as well, the stocktake process. I mean, you remember these UN processes, facilitative dialogues, these boring words. We give life to this kind of processes. And then we managed to get this first experience in the Talanoa process. So the first time when Paris Agreement, after its entry into force, we started Talanoa dialogues at the local level. We convinced them, yeah, exactly. Fijian presidency opened the space because we pushed this. We told them that don't limit it just to a UN conference. And the decision from the SPs there, the COP, saying that local inputs will also be possible. And then we rolled it out across the world. And that gave the opportunity, these Talanoa dialogues, countries like Rwanda, Dominican Republic, US, Japan, all of them came to Glasgow with new NDCs or revised NDCs, and they were more ambitious than that because they received inputs from their citizens and local governments. So we repeated the same thing in the global stocktake. Again, there was nothing on the table. In June 2022, we pushed as LGMA, and they inserted this paragraph where local stocktakes could be possible. So over these months, we had made local stocktakes in 25 plus cities around the world. Madison, correct me, Abidjan is one of them? Abidjan stocktake was also took place in Abidjan. No, okay. There were a lot in Africa, in all continents, 6 continents, in north and south and east and west. And we have brought the messages. That was good because also it was convenient with the youth. The youth groups were part of it, Yungo, and some of them were convened by them. And that was the same logic. Climate emergency declarations at the council level was also pushed by youth. And we invited them to make sure that declaring a climate emergency is not enough if you don't act. Come to your town hall, discuss what you have done, what is your city committed to, just like what you heard from Leonie. Make this part of your commitment as well. Second, talk about your national government. What is NDC? What is your NDC? What does it mean to your city? How can you contribute, or how can you receive support? And the third, justice. How do you address justice, climate justice, at the local and global level? The good news is that after all these experiences, we have presented all the results to this during the couple of days here. We are now changing gears, as you have said. We are now going towards town hall COPs. The logic is the global stocktake will not come back again in the next 3 years or so. But we will not wait for the next global stocktake. We are now encouraging every member of ICLE and LGMA constituencies to dedicate at least one day in a year. It could be like part of the Climate Action Week. Leonie, I'm sure we have discussed it with you, that produce a result, focus on these discussions so that it's not just your neighborhood climate policy, but where is your role in the national and global processes, and document it in an appropriate way. Use the digital technology and bring the results to COP in Baku, to Belém, so that mayors, councils do not have to travel, but the response or the information can reach to the UNFCCC, and this will be a game changer. We're confident. So whatever happens this COP regarding the language, we will not wait for this. We have already multi-level collaboration in so many countries. UK is not here yet, but so many others in your countries here. And with this town hall COPs, we will change the course of action. We will bring citizen engagement, accountability, collective effort, decentralized, crowdsourcing efforts. This is the new reality, the power of youth, the power of communities, the power of digitalization, that the COPs will be more informed. More importantly, the new NDCs will be much more robust, alive, and real and ambitious. So that's why I would like to continue to work with you, with all the members of the parliamentarians, to open the space and then join this, so that literally we're aiming for 2,500. This year we had only 25. We aim for 2,500 town hall COPs to be presented by Baku.
So, Leonie, I just want to pick up on this with you so that you can reflect on the challenge. Of course, you'll know for London Climate Action Week, that was always intended as the audit point, once a year, every year for the City of London. But as Yunus has said, I mean, is this something that the City Hall, London City Hall, could adopt as ahead of the next round of NDCs, which are due 2025, that we have City Hall actually undertake a stocktake? There's nothing stopping it. So if you can, have a think about how that could be made to work. And Namika, I'm going to pass over to you for the question about climate literacy in Nigeria. and broader.
Thank you. So when we were drafting the Nigerian Climate Change Act, I was privileged to be the secretary of the committee that drafted it. So one of the things that we provided for was for the National Council on Climate Change, which is the highest decision-making body when it comes to issues about climate change in Nigeria, to work with the Ministry of Education to include climate change education into our curriculum. Has that been done yet? Not really. But I know that UNICEF is working on getting that done. UNICEF did series of engagements recently to be able to develop a means of including climate change into the Nigerian educational curricula. But then it comes down to one other important thing. If the Climate Change Act had made a stipulation that the National Council on Climate Change should make provisions for the inclusion of climate change into Nigeria's educational curriculum, what then are legislators doing when the National Council on Climate Change comes to them for budget defense during appropriation? It's now the duty of the legislators to ask questions. Oh, okay, I've seen your budget. Where is the provision for climate change education? And this brings me back to one key issue that has always troubled me, and that's the fact that even the legislators may not know so much about climate change. I hate to say it, but in Nigeria, if you are given the climate change committee, either in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, it's seen as some form of punishment. Yeah, because this is not a committee that brings money. Everybody wants a committee on petroleum. Everybody wants something on local content. These committees on finance, power, that would bring money. So, and incidentally, we don't allocate committees or a committee chair based on your knowledge or your passion for any particular thing. So for Africa, and I know that this experience is the same for almost all of Africa. So for Africa, it's just something that has to do with overhauling our entire governance system, overhauling how we do things, and starting the educational process first from those who make the decisions, those who interrogate the decisions, before you can now bring it down to the common man who also doesn't know so much about climate change. I'm really, really pleased to hear Eunice talk about the community town hall corps. This, for me, is something massive and something that I'm really looking forward to. Thank you.
And so thank you for that really helpful answer, Namika. The thing is, COP is so complex that one loses sight of the fact that there is a whole different conversation taking place about climate education, which brings together the world's universities, informal education institutes, and there are already processes underway. So our challenge is how we bring that information to those who need to introduce it into policies, measures, legislation. But I'd like to come back to you, Leonie, to help lead us out. This very interesting idea of a city hall COP. I mean, is it something that we could run with in London? The purpose of organizing these sessions is also about linking people, connecting. So your thoughts to help lead us out.
Oh, could you just repeat some of that, Melanie? I couldn't quite catch it all. Sorry.
Yeah, so just briefly, this wonderful idea that's come out of ICLE about, instead of having a global stock take, which is just at a global level and involves national governments, to have something where we're bringing COP closer to home. It's not so remote, but we should be having city hall COPs, which are local COPs. Is that something that could find legs in London?
Yes, interestingly, actually, Camden, which is one of the 32 London boroughs in London, was holding an event this weekend, which they called their own local Camden COP. And I think it's an excellent way to bring it right down to a very, very human level. I mean, obviously, we can learn so much from each other internationally. So I think it's really good to have the international sessions where people can hear from each other. and get that sort of international learning. And obviously, the London is involved in the C40 Cities Group, and in fact, actually, the London Mayor is currently the chair of the C40. Of course, it's not 40 cities anymore, but of course, I think that is a learning for national governments and regional governments. But then you need the very local learning as well, and I think bringing it down to a very local kind of thing that people can do in their backyard. And we need to relearn quite a lot of things. I mean, the whole principle behind, refilling a water bottle. 40 years ago, nobody had, mineral water in plastic bottles. It didn't exist as a thing. 40 years ago, people got out a sewing kit, and if their clothes needed to be fixed, they actually fixed their clothes. They took their shoes to the shoemakers and got their boots and shoes resold and fixed. And we've stopped doing so much of that. We've become such a throwaway society. And so having these sort of, these very, very local sessions that people are running where you can go along and, I mean, some people don't even know how to change a plug on an electrical appliance. So, they throw it away and go out and buy a new kettle, which is clearly ridiculous. Just change the fuse. So it's all of that sort of thing of relearning at a very local, very enjoyable level where people just get together and have a session on a Saturday morning where they get to meet people they might not otherwise have met, who can show them how to do these things. Or you are encouraging local shops to set back up with people who've got these skills that we need to rediscover. So in many ways, we need to get back to, having that lifestyle where not everything revolves around plastic and all these things that have become a convenience. But, you do not need a plastic bag. You can have a paper bag, or you can have a string bag that you reuse, so many times it's ridiculous. And people are going back to all of those principles. And I think the idea of going back to being very local and really spending time in your local area and getting to know people that you live near, it's good for people's health. It's good for people's mental health, and that's why the initiatives around more nature in big cities is also really important, because getting people outside and away from screen time and away from just playing games on computers and actually walking and being outside in the air. And once you've cleaned up the air, it's a whole way of looking at things that we need to make sure comes into our cities so much more. And that's the journey that we're on in London, as in many other areas.
Indeed. And I think we need to stretch our legs before long also. We're just going to become rooted to these chairs. But Leonie, you've also brought us full circle, because Eunice and I belong to a generation, as you do, which remembers Local Agenda 21. Where we were talking all about the local action and connecting the local with the global. So thank you very much for helping us make that connection on this multi-level agenda. And hope you have a wonderful day, the rest of your week in London. Thank you so much to everyone who's stuck with us here in the pavilion at COP, and all those who are joining us. Thank you so much, and delighted to bring it to such a good close.